What's the future of the Met Police? You know, you were on a morning talk show, and there's obviously a lot of people sign up for the police department in this country who don't want to carry a gun, which is, of course, not the case in the States, and I want to talk about the States after this. And you think that that should be their right if they want a police without a firearm?
No, I actually, from a purely moral standpoint, think that police officers are there to protect the public. And I don't see how they can do that if they can't even protect themselves. And it's summed up to me by an American colleague of mine way back in the 80s, and he said, Tony, so why do you teach your, sorry about my American accent.
Not bad accent.
He was born in Germany and his mother was Irish, so he was a trainer.
Okay.
He goes, you know, what do you teach your unarmed barbies to do when they respond to an armed robbery? And I went, well, we teach them to get behind a brick wall or a tree, get on the radio and call for some backup. And he goes, so you pretty well train the cops to do what the civilians do naturally without any training. And it's like, yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense when you put it like that. And if
Which is what happened with Lee Rigby.
Well, yeah, and I said this to the commissioner. After the incident, I went and spoke to the commissioner about a month later. And he was talking about the Lee Rigby incident. And I said, well, of course, the other thing with the three ARV officers that turned up.
So for people in America that don't know the details, can you give us like a minute summary?
Okay. Lee Rigby was an off-duty soldier based at barracks in Woolwich. He'd served in Afghanistan, and he was making his way along the street. He was clearly a soldier, an off-duty soldier, by virtue of what he was wearing. He wasn't in uniform. And two homegrown jihadists deliberately ran him over and then brutalised his body and murdered him in the street with a machete and a large knife. Effectively tried to behead him in the street. Now, there are 31,000 officers in the Met, but only 2,000 of them at the time were trained in the use of firearms. About 500 of those will be on the armed response vehicles. So they're spread across a city, I think it's about 800 square miles or something stupid. 8 million people, whatever it is, 300 square miles, 8 million people. It took them 15 minutes to get there. But the local officers, the unarmed officers, were on scene relatively quickly, within 5 minutes. So for about 10 minutes, the unarmed officers, because they don't have guns, and because if they'd approached, by virtue of the fact they're police officers, they would have been targets, had to stand back behind the incident tape and watch the public that they're sworn to protect do their job for them. Because about 20 or so members of the public, outraged by what had happened, were trying to remonstrate with these two jihadists and tell them to put their knives down, and had to put up with these jihadists waving their, covered in blood, preaching their hate.
With the body in front of them.
With the body in the middle of the road, and when members of the public tried to, protect the body, they were chased off by these guys. Now what happened is the armed response vehicles arrived. They actually got told the suspects were on a bus and approached the bus. And as they're just getting out of the vehicle, one of the jihadists with a knife runs directly at them, and the guy getting half in and half out of his vehicle just goes bat, 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 shoots him, and the guy goes down with literally a foot to spare before he was on top of him. The other guy walks across them or runs across the front of them with a handgun, which was the reason that the police didn't approach. Now, it turns out this handgun didn't work. It was an antique, but they'd clearly taken it because they wanted the armed police to martyr them.
Okay.
But by having a gun, they knew that the unarmed bobbies wouldn't approach and would just have to stand back. So, if our job is to protect the public, but actually the public end up doing our job for us, I don't think that's right. The other thing is, from a purely moral standpoint, it's like when the attacker in Nice, drove his lorry through all those people.
Yeah, all down the beach and killed.
He wasn't stopped by some specialist unit or an armed response vehicle unit. He was just stopped by regular cops that were there policing a firework display that would have been there in any event. Yeah, if that happened in London, that lorry would have travelled a lot longer and killed a lot more people before it found a policeman with a gun that was able to stop it. Likewise, the lorry attack on the Christmas market in Berlin. If that suspect, instead of heading south on the train and going to Italy, where acting suspiciously, he was approached by two street duty cops who just went, there's something wrong with that guy. Hey, buddy, got some ID. He produced a gun on them, shot one of them, they returned fire and killed him. If instead of travelling south to Italy, he'd got on a Eurostar or got on a ferry and two unarmed cops had stopped him for the same reason, because he looked suspicious, outside King's Cross Police Station or King's Cross Railway Station, we'd have 2 dead cops on our hand. So for me, if there are cops in the system, police officers in the system, in the Met, that really don't want to carry a gun, that's fine, because no one in the police currently joined with any expectation that they'd be required to carry a firearm. But people go, we're unarmed in the UK. No, we're not. There are police officers on bicycles or in a little patrol car patrolling a small town like Portrush in Northern Ireland, where even during the Troubles there was no real terrorist activity, who are still to this day allowed to carry a gun on duty and off duty because of, it's a historical thing. So there is a police force, the police service in Northern Ireland, that are routinely armed. If you go across to Sweden or Belgium or Holland, there's always, whenever we talk about arming the police, because we share a similar language, or we don't want to be like America. Well, why would we be like America? Like I said earlier, why wouldn't we be like Belgium? Because you've got Belgian police officers patrolling little quiet villages in the country who have the opportunity and the ability to protect themselves if they just did a routine stop on a car travelling through their ground.
So armed police don't create crime, is what you're saying. But Britain has this idea that they will.
Armed crime has gone, we banned the private ownership of handguns after a particularly nasty incident where a paedophile went into Andy Murray's own school. When Andy Murray was a child, this guy walked into a class and killed, I think it was something in the region of 14 children and their school teacher with a handgun. So, there is no right to keep and bear arms in the United Kingdom. It was a privilege that you were given if you met certain criteria and you provided security for your weapon and you had a gun club to shoot it in and all the rest of it. That was taken away, and they went, right, okay, that's not happening again. And so everybody handed their guns in. And yet, all the gun crime that we've been talking about, all of the Operation Trident, people getting guns out in the middle of a nightclub and shooting them into the ceiling, to show support for the DJ, or walking up to some guy that's standing at the bar and shooting him because of some outstanding drugs thing. That's all happened since private gun ownership has gone out the window. That's got nothing to do with, there's no correlation. But the point I'm making is, there are less guns, in theory, out there now than there was, in the mid-90s. Okay.
So
armed crime has got worse, and yet we have less shots now than we did when I joined the unit in 1983.
So Britain needs to wake up. The police force needs to get their identity problem solved.
I think what they need to be thinking about, they need to think about future-proofing, and they need to say, look, okay, even if we have no plans to arm everybody, if you join as of the 3rd of April 2018, when you sign on dotted line, it is signing an acceptance that you may at some point be required to carry a firearm in the course of your duty. I think that officers who, there's an increase in the amount of officers carrying taser. Well, taser's okay, but it's basically a muzzle-loading, single-shot electric musket. If somebody's running at you with a machete and both barbs don't connect, which quite often is the case, it hasn't worked. You're kind of screwed because you're within 21 foot of some guy that's got a great big machete, and you've fired your one deal and it's over.
Right.
Continue watching this fascinating conversation for free by clicking on the link below to visit our website, learn from the best minds in the world, and connect with a community of passionate people building the best versions of themselves. Just click on the link below, and I'll see you on the inside.